So, Dr. Fry, we're all good to go here in the room. We're just waiting for Mr. Biddle, but I'm sure he'll be along presently. And anytime you want to start up the meeting, you can.
Thank you very much. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, everyone. I'm now opening the meeting. Welcome to the 77th meeting of Heritage Canada. I would like to note that today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and we are on the traditional territory of the Algonquin peoples.
Format, as most of you know, pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June the 23rd, 2022. Now, again, I will make this little bit of housekeeping announcement here that while public health authorities and the Board of Internal Economy no longer require mask wearing, if you are in the room, that it would be a very good idea, just for the sake of yourselves and each other, to wear a mask, because COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases are still there around us. So the mask use is recommended. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants of this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website so that you can get whatever you need when you go to that site. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, the committee is meeting to continue its study on safe sports in Canada. A couple of quick things. Do not speak unless Chair recognizes you to speak. Please direct all your questions and answers through the Chair. At the very bottom of your screen, for those of you who are on virtual, there is a little icon of a globe, and if you can press that, you can get your translations in English or in French or in whatever the language is originally there. I think that's basically all we need to know. And so we're going to start our witnesses for today. We have, for the first hour, as an individual, Stephen Reid, former president, Canadian Soccer, by video conferencing. And so Mr. Reid, the speaker will be given 5 minutes to speak, and then there will be an open question and answer session in which you will be asked questions and you will respond to them. And I will give you a 30-second shout out, and I mean shout out. I will say 30 seconds so that you can hear me, because sometimes when people are reading their testimony, they don't look up to see a sign flashing saying 30 seconds or whatever. So when I give you the 30 seconds head up, I will expect that you will take the 30 seconds to wrap up. Sometimes if you don't get to finish what you have to say, it'll all come out in the wash when you get the questions and answers. You can make the points that you want to make then. So beginning. Mr. Reid, welcome to the committee, and you now have 5 minutes to begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As pointed out, I'm Stephen Reid. For much of my adult life, I've dedicated my time to volunteering in the sport of soccer. I've coached youth teams in Victoria and Surrey, served as Vice President and President of the British Columbia Soccer Association, and served on Canada Soccer's Board of Directors for 15 years. Most recently, as the committee knows, I was Vice President of Canada Soccer from 2012 to 2017, and President of Canada Soccer from 2017 to 2020. Prior to that, it was my great privilege to serve on the National Organizing Committee for the FIFA Women's World Cup Canada 2015, a competition that was one of the high points for me and for soccer in Canada. As this committee also knows, Canada Soccer is the governing body for the sport of soccer in our country, made up of provincial and territorial associations and professional league members. Canada Soccer is also charged with coaching development, referee development, and national team programs at all age levels. During my time on the Canada Soccer Board, I focused on collaborating with partners and staff to grow soccer in Canada from the grassroots level up, and strove to ensure that soccer is the safest sport in our country. Building on that outline, the remarks that I make today will focus on two areas, specifically, one, my role in the negotiations of the Canada Soccer, Canadian Soccer Business, or CSB agreement, and two, the safe sports guardrails that were initiated during my time on the Canada Soccer Board. Before proceeding further, I also want to underline that I left Canada Soccer in 2020 when my term expired, and I've played no role in the association since that time. As such, my ability to comment on more recent events is limited. Regarding the CSB agreement, which was unanimously agreed to by the Canada Soccer Board on March 23, 2018, as this committee has heard, the CSB agreement provides valuable broadcast and streaming opportunities for both senior national teams. It guarantees annual payments to Canada Soccer and has secured new partners for investment in grassroots and high-performance soccer in Canada. Prior to the CSB agreement, Canada Soccer was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to broadcast women's and men's national team matches. No Canadian broadcaster was willing to pay to broadcast the games. The agreement resolved that issue and has helped grow the women's and men's game in Canada. That reality was one of the motivating factors of the Canada Soccer Board for entering into the agreement. In short, there are benefits to the agreement for all parties. The CSB agreement is a dynamic document, and I know current Canada Soccer and CSB senior leadership are exploring ways to update it. But at the outset, the agreement was a strong and appropriate way to create revenue certainty for Canada Soccer and to control costs. It's also important to note the CSB agreement is not the only source of revenue for Canada Soccer. For example, Canada Soccer receives significant gate revenue from the matches the association hosts. On the matter of safe and respectful conduct in sport, my firm personal belief is everyone who engages in sport must be afforded the right and opportunity to play, train, and compete in a healthy and supportive environment that is respectful, equitable, and free from all forms of harassment and abuse. During the time I served as president of Canada Soccer, our board and staff took many actions to ensure the association was meeting that imperative, including by leading or assisting with developing and launching a club licensing program, building a relationship with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, signing a long-term partnership with the Respect Group, hiring a manager of coach education and a master coach developer, and publishing a new coach education pathway. We also developed and rolled out a national children's license and approved and launched the Canada Soccer Safe Sport roster, which combines mandatory certification for all coaches, a sophisticated club licensing program, a national soccer registry, a whistleblower policy and hotline, a code of conduct and ethics, and concussion protocols to create the best possible conditions for players, coaches, referees, and administrators. Those and other initiatives are indicative of my personal commitment to safe sport and of Canada Soccer's commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of everyone playing and participating in soccer in Canada. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. I did not have to give you a 30-second, Mr. Reid. So thank you. We're now going to go into the question and answer session. The first round is 6 minutes. And so I must remind everyone that the 6 minutes contains and must include a question and answer. So be as succinct as you possibly can. And we will begin this round with a member from the Conservative Party. I have no idea who that person is. So perhaps you can put your hand up, or the clerk can tell me if your hand is up from the floor.
It will be Mrs. Thomas.
Yes, Mrs. Thomas, for the Conservative. Can someone turn their mic off from the floor, please? Thank you. Now, so the first one up would be for the Conservatives, Mrs. Thomas. Rachel, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Reid, you served as president of BC Soccer from 2006 to 2009, and at the same time, you also served as on the board for Canada Soccer. In 2008, the women's coach Bob Berarda was accused of sexually assaulting players. Now, eventually, he was released from Soccer Canada, but the allegations were covered up, and it was said to be a, quote, mutual decision. A few months later, Mr. Berarda was hired to coach the U14 girls team under BC Soccer. As president of BC Soccer at that time, I'm wondering what your role was in that decision-making process.
During the period 2006 through 2009, you're correct. I was the president of BC Soccer. When the accusations came out about Bob Barada, it was dealt with by the executive board of Canada Soccer. The governance structure at that time was much different than it is now. There was an executive board of about 7 individuals, I believe, and the provincial and territorial presidents were also on the board, but not part of any decision-making process. So when the accusations came out and were brought to light, those were dealt with by the executive board, and we were informed after the fact by, I can't recall the communication, whether it was written, email communication, or if it was at a subsequent board meeting. The results of the ombudsperson's recommendations, and ultimately coming to the termination of Mr. Barada from Canada Soccer's role.
Right, but then as president of BC Soccer, the decision was made to hire him subsequently after that. After you were informed, a decision was made to hire him for the U14 team.
He was not hired by BC Soccer for any role, to my knowledge.
He was not hired?
Not to my knowledge.
I will look further into that then. Okay. I will move to my next questions then, having to do with the soccer deal. I'm curious as to why the deal with Canada Soccer Business was never put into the annual report.
Which annual report are you referring to?
Canada Soccer's annual report.
It may have been a timing issue. I don't recall if that was the annual report for after the agreement was executed. That would have been in 2019. Our board meeting, our annual general meeting, would have been in May of that year, and I know of no reason why it was or was not included in that annual report.
Was it a strategic plan? Was it reported there?
In the strategic plan of that would have been the 2019 strategic plan. I don't recall that either, whether it was included or not.
I
don't have those documents readily available to me, so I can't, I can't comment on that.
Okay. When the deal was created, was there any legal counsel that was consulted, or a professional consultant with regards to sponsorship deals of this nature?
The legal counsel was engaged in terms of reviewing the provisions of the agreement, the memorandum of understanding, and drafting of the actual document. We did not take counsel on the sponsorship aspects of it from any external body.
So I'm just curious as to your qualifications to sign off on such a deal.
My individual qualifications? I mean, I am as the president of the board of directors, I act on their recommendations and their approval. I executed the document based on a board motion where they gave me the directive to sign on behalf of the board. So I don't know that my individual qualifications with regard to the sponsorship agreement are relevant.
I'm sorry. So as president of the time, you're saying your involvement or your qualifications in terms of considering such a deal, that's not relevant? You're just simply the man who puts the seal on the document?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that. It was a collective agreement. It was reviewed by all of the board and legal counsel, and we collectively, collaboratively determined that the CSB agreement was something that we wanted to pursue and sign.
As president at the time, I'm curious as to whether or not the CSB deal was reported to Heritage Canada, since you were receiving public funds from them at the time.
I don't recall whether it was reported to Heritage Canada.
I'm curious then as to how we would find that information. Who would be able to tell us whether or not that was reported to Heritage Canada?
You would have to direct your query to current staff, I believe.
All right. I'll leave it there. That's my time.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to now go to the Liberals and Anthony Housefather. 6 minutes, Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Reid. Mr. Reid, in preparation from your testimony today, did you discuss your testimony with either Victor Metelliani, Peter Montopoli, Nick Bontis, or Earl Cochrane?
I had discussion with Earl Cochrane. I have not had any discussions with any of the other individuals.
Thank you. In terms of Ms. Thomas's question about the U14 team in BC, she used the word hired. Well, BC Soccer may not have hired him, but he did coach a U14 team in BC months after he was let go by Canada Soccer. Why, as president of BC Soccer, did you allow somebody who you knew to have these allegations against him to coach a team of young women?
We do not have, BC Soccer does not coaches. That would have been at a club or district level. At the time, there was no national registry of coaches. There was no ability to determine, whether that individual was coaching in our province or any other province. Unfortunately,
okay, Mr. Reid, the gentleman was coaching in British Columbia a team of young women months after you knew he had had these allegations against him. Are you saying that you were completely unaware and everybody on the board in BC Soccer was completely unaware that he was coaching in the province for the next 10 years?
I can't speak to other members of the board, but I was unaware that he was coaching at that time.
Decade, you were unaware, while you were president of Canada Soccer, you were unaware that the man was coaching in BC?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sure my colleagues will have many more questions on this. Let me ask another question, because I'm flabbergasted at that answer, and I don't think I want to further pursue it. Section 1.10 of the bylaws of Canada Soccer that were in place at the date that you signed the CSB agreement stated as follows: deeds, transfers, assignments, contracts, and obligations, and other instruments in writing requiring execution by Canada Soccer shall be signed by the General Secretary and any one of the President or Vice President. You were the only one that signed the CSB agreement, Mr. Reid. Why did Peter Montopoli, the General Secretary who was required by the bylaws to sign it, not sign it?
It was an inadvertent oversight. The board had unanimously approved the agreement and issued a directive.
Bylaws, your own bylaws, Mr. Reid, stated that the General Secretary was supposed to sign every agreement. Did you not follow that practice while the bylaws were in place? Were there other agreements you executed by yourself?
No, there were no other agreements that I executed by myself.
There were no other agreements you executed by yourself. So how did this one slip through the cracks? Was Mr. Montopoli opposed to the signing of this agreement?
No, not to my knowledge. The contracts were written up by legal counsel for both parties, and they included one signatory for each of Canada Soccer and Canadian Soccer Business, and we signed on that basis.
Okay, to violate your bylaws because the lawyer put one line on the document instead of two? You didn't think he could sign below or above and make it valid?
As I said, it was inadvertent. It was an oversight. It was not deliberate, and we executed it.
You mentioned in your testimony that on March the 23rd, 2018, Canada Soccer authorized the signature of these agreements that you signed on January the 1st, 2019. But what you're missing, Mr. Reid, is that Canada Soccer has changed its story. When they showed up here, that's what they claimed. And I showed them that there were minutes in December 2018 showing that the board itself had clearly determined that it had not approved the deal because the deal was still being negotiated. Then they showed up mysteriously with minutes of 7 February 2019, where the board did approve the deal. You have a director named Ryan Fiquette who was on the board at the time, and he's quoted as saying the board recognized this was a expletive deal from the start. You should know about an organization you are partnering with if you're giving them literally all your marketing rights. And every time we've asked for information about Canada's soccer business, the board has been shut down. The board absolutely did not approve this contract. So Mr. Fiquette was a member of the board on both of these dates. How could he say this when you're claiming the whole board agreed?
I can't speak to Mr. Fiquette's comments, but the board approved the agreement in March to move ahead to get legal counsel to draft all the appropriate documents. There was another meeting in December where there was a review of another iteration of the agreement. Further non-substantive changes have been made, and the February 7th meeting was the final approval where the board approved the agreement and for me to sign on behalf of Canada Soccer.
I find this a very weird deal. Why did you sole source the agreement to CSB? You had others in the market like Soccer United Marketing that did the deals with Mexico and the United States, obtaining substantially greater amounts of money. Why did you decide to sole source the deal to CSB?
It was one of the factors
30 seconds.
that led to the creation of the Canadian Premier League. Canadian Soccer Business was a Canadian group, and it made sense for us to partner
groups
with them.
That could have, there were no other Canadian groups that existed?
Perspective.
There were no other Canadian groups that existed that could have bid on this business? Did Mr. Mattiliani make this an original introduction?
There was a number of people that were involved with the initial introduction.
Was he involved?
Representatives from...
Was he involved? Was Mr.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Anthony.
Point of order.
I now
Madam Chair, point of order.
yes, Kevin?
Sorry, I would like this guest, Mr. Reid, to be sworn under oath. I've heard enough already from Mr. Reid to, so if the clerk wouldn't mind to prepare him for the oath.
Yes, clerk, will you please prepare Mr. Reid for the oath?
Sure. We're going to go with the solemn affirmation since it's the easiest one to perform at distance. If you could please repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Stephen Reid,
Do solemnly, sincerely, and truly
do solemnly, sincerely, and truly
affirm and declare that the evidence
affirm and declare that the evidence
I shall give on this examination
I shall give on this examination
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Reid. And so we're going to now go to Mr. Lemire from the Bloc Québécois. And 6 minutes, Sébastien.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. In the light of this first bunch of questions, I wonder if I was going to talk to you about the Whitecaps, Vanner, but when the treasurer in 2009, when at that time, were you aware of disturbing stories about a coach who was embezzling funds? And Monday, you called Soccer Canada and you said that you did not take action against him. You rather supported him, and then you were not able to provide any information on any awareness you had of this situation.
I would have to have more specific details of the situation. I'm not aware of any embezzled funds. this is a very serious allegation, and it definitely would have been brought to our attention, and we would have acted accordingly.
Merci. Je veux revenir.
Thank you. So coming back to the agreement with Canada Soccer Business, you found that it was a good agreement, but you had a fixed amount, nothing provided for any renegotiation, and you were depending entirely on the goodwill of Canadian soccer business. There was nothing for women in this agreement, and there was nothing to permit the development of a professional women's team. How can you say that it was a good agreement? And why would you not have had something other than a fixed amount?
Well, first of all, the agreement did, as I outlined in my my opening remarks, provide revenue certainty for us going forward, and did control costs where we could get broadcast of our women's and men's national team games across the country with no cost to us. The revenue source that are generated from the CSB agreement support all of the programs. So it's not just men or women, it's all the activities that Canada Soccer undertakes. So we viewed it as being a very positive deal at a time where, to be honest, revenues were somewhat uncertain in certain areas. And it did give us that comfort that going forward, we would have a stable revenue source to carry on all the activities of Canada Soccer.
Je suis toujours surpris d'entendre le fait que.
I'm always surprised to hear about this issue of costs, and with all the programs that are possible, and with the World Cup, and then the Olympic team, and the men's team. You should have known that there were funding amounts for one of the most common sports in Canada or even the world. Why would you have excluded the possibility of renegotiating this agreement?
First of all, when the negotiations commenced, we didn't have the World Cup 2026 hosting rights. That came shortly thereafter. But and at the time, our men's team were, not where they are today. That's a positive thing today, where we can talk about them in this light. So it was a different landscape at the time when we were, carrying on the negotiations as to where we are today. I still say that based on the revenue certainty and the cost controls that are there, it represents a positive agreement for all parties. The renewal provision in the contract does allow us to commence those discussions very far in advance of the renewal date, and it's in the best interest of both parties to carry on, extensive negotiations at that time. So there's an 18-month clause where they have to exercise the renewal option. And then there's a discussion period for 6 months to go over all of the details and where the contract lies at that time, and both parties to present their position.
C'est difficile à concevoir que
I find it hard to believe that applying for the World Cup, you didn't look ahead to what could be negotiated and what could be undertaken, and the new financial structure was not approved by Revenue Canada for your funding arrangements, and we since the founding of Soccer Canada since 2023, you've believed that why would you not make any declaration on this to Revenue Canada?
30 seconds.
I'm not sure what referencing you're making to Revenue Canada. And I haven't been on the board since 2020, so I would not have any knowledge of any recent communication communications with Canada Revenue Agency and Canada Soccer.
Thank you, Sebastien. I think we now go to the New Democrats, to Peter Julien. Peter, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. In this committee, we've dealt with the problems within Hockey Canada, and we have tried to identify those who are guilty of abuses and financial misconduct. And what we've been hearing over these past weeks, I think that Canada Soccer is in a much worse situation than Hockey Canada.
Mr. Reid, by the testimony that we've been hearing about Canada Soccer, the refusal to really handle serious cases of sexual abuse seriously, to deal with financial matters in a responsible way. And I believe, quite frankly, that Canada Soccer is worse than Hockey Canada in many respects in dealing with these important issues. I would like to come back to the questions that were asked by Mrs. Thomas and Mr. Housefather around the case of a sexual offender, somebody who is in prison for his sexual offenses, Bob Barada. And from what I understand in your testimony that is now under oath, that you are aware of the allegations and simply lost track of where he was in the Canada Soccer system. Is that what is an honest interpretation of what you've just told us?
Yeah, we didn't have any mechanism for tracking coaches in the country. So as a representative of BC Soccer, I would not have been aware of him being hired or appointed by any one of the clubs or districts. We did not have the ability to do that at that time. Now, during the
can I ask you, Mr. Reid, did you have access to a phone? Did you have access to the mail? Did you have access to simply notify outside, right across the country, that there were serious allegations of sexual abuse brought towards this person, and that this person should not be given any access to any potential victim on any team anywhere in the country?
I do not believe that I, had the authority to do that. I'm not sure what the conditions were that were entered into between Canada Soccer and the individual, and it wouldn't have been something that as an individual, would I pursue something like that because of the appalling abuse? Yes, but I guess the point being is that I didn't have the authority as the president of BC Soccer to go out and alert the community. I think today's...
I would disagree, Mr. Reid. You had a responsibility. You had a responsibility to ensure that there were no further victims. And it appears that the entire Canada Soccer mechanism failed in that regard. And I'm quite frankly stunned by what you're telling us today.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you that at the time, the mechanisms were not in place. And that's why we undertook over the last 3-4 years to change the landscape. And that was part of the whole Safe Sport roster that was implemented and approved by our at our AGM in 2019, which deals with club licensing, which deals with the code of conduct and ethics, which deals with the whistleblower policy and hotline. So all of these
let's come to the whistleblower
initiatives were put in place.
Yes, Mr. Reid, let's come to the whistleblower hotline. How was it evaluated? Because it was virtually impossible anecdotally, as you may be aware. It was very difficult for victims to actually access the line, actually file complaints, and they, of course, had lost confidence in the system. So how did you evaluate the whistleblower hotline while you were president to ensure it was actually working, to ensure safety for the victims, to ensure that they had a place to go to report abuses and allegations of abuses? This is exceedingly serious. I think we will understand each other that these issues of sexual assault and sexual abuse are serious, and it appears that Canada Soccer, BC Soccer, failed lamentably the victims. How did you evaluate the whistleblower hotline?
It was monitored by an independent body, so that they received the calls and reviewed the incidents and made assessments of the incidents, and then reported back to Risk Management Committee for Canada Soccer of any issues that were necessary to be reviewed by the governing body.
Often did they report, and how, because the system didn't work, we've heard this from victims themselves. Because the system didn't work, how did you respond? How did the organization respond to make the system functional so that victims had recourse?
30 seconds.
The whistleblower policy and hotline were implemented in about 2019, and I guess it was an ongoing review of the effectiveness and the efficacy of the policy and hotline itself to make improvements. I can't comment on what's happened since, but definitely it was something that was reviewed and reported on by the Risk Management Committee on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. That's it. And now we're going to move into the second round. And the second round is a 5-minute round. And we begin with the Conservatives. For 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Reid, in 2008, were you president of BC Soccer?
Yes, I was.
So, and did you also serve on the board for Canada Soccer?
Yes, I did.
And in 2008, did it come to your attention that Mr. Berarda was accused of sexually assaulting players and therefore let go from Canada Soccer?
Yes, the executive board reported to the broader group of board members who were the provincial and territorial presidents that he would be terminated. We did not have all of the details as to all of the allegations at that time.
What details did you have access to? Did you know that there had been allegations brought against him?
Yes.
Okay. So you were president of BC Soccer, you were on the Canada Soccer board, and you were aware that Mr. Berarda was accused of sexually assaulting players. You knew that he was released from Canada Soccer based on these allegations, and yet in your role as president of BC Soccer, you did not think that it was incumbent upon you to make sure that the league understood that there were these allegations brought against him and that perhaps there should be a yellow flag placed by his name, if not a red flag, when it comes to hiring coaches within the region.
Could you repeat the question, please?
You were president of BC Soccer. You were sitting on the Canada Soccer board. You were aware of the allegations brought against Mr. Berarda. You knew why he was let go from Canada Soccer. Yet in your role as president of BC Soccer, you did not feel that it was your responsibility to report to the region, the league, the federation, that there was this individual out there who may be looking for a coaching job and perhaps not to hire him. That thought never crossed your mind, that perhaps in your role as president, which I'll remind you that your first role is to make sure that the sport remains safe, productive, and well, which means that your players need to be cared for. So in your role as president of BC Soccer, you never thought that it was perhaps your responsibility to convey the information that you knew with regards to Mr. Berarda.
I did not have all of the details with regard to the allegations against Mr. Berarda. And I did not believe that I had the authority to deal with the matter. It was dealt with by Canada Soccer and by the Vancouver Whitecaps and an independent ombudsperson at the time. So to your question, I did not believe that I had the authority to go beyond that.
Okay. So you're president of BC Soccer and you're on the Canada Soccer Board. What did you need in order to have the authority? What were you missing?
I believe I would have taken legal counsel to find out whether I was in a position to be able to report on a matter that was dealt independently with two other bodies.
Why didn't you do that? Did you not care about the players and the implications that this could have for these girls who are in U14 soccer?
Yes, but I didn't know at the time that he was coaching a U14 team. I didn't know that he was coaching within our system.
But you did know that he was let go from Canada Soccer because of these serious allegations brought against him. And you were
Correct.
president of BC Soccer. So you did decide to turn a blind eye to this and did decide to mute yourself. You did decide that. And you're saying right now that you could have sought legal counsel in order to know what you could have said to the Federation. And you chose not to seek that legal counsel and instead remain silent. Why did you choose to remain silent?
I did not choose to remain silent. It was an issue that had been dealt with by other parties, and it was communicated by them to us, and it was viewed that it was within their authority and their bailiwick to deal with the matter.
So I'm curious. We are now several years later, and we know that a plethora of young girls and young women have been sexually assaulted by Mr. Berarda. We know that that likely could have been prevented had you used your voice. What would you say to those victims now?
I would apologize profusely if that was the case, if there was any abuses that occurred as a result of that. I want to ensure that everybody understands that I'm absolutely appalled by what went on, and I feel as though since that time, the soccer community has changed drastically, and we made significant changes so that those types of abuses will never happen again. It's something that we shouldn't and can't see in our sport or in any other sport across the country.
I need you to wrap up your
I feel
answer,
very strongly,
please. Mr. Reid, I need you to wrap up your
very
answer,
strongly
please.
that. Thank you.
All right, the next is for the Liberals, and it would be Ms. Hepner. Lisa, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just continue on the same pathway as my colleague, Mrs. Thomas. Sir, I think what we've established so far this afternoon that you felt no moral onus to make sure that other young athletes weren't at risk of abuse, given the abuse that you were already aware of after Bob Berarda left your purview. And you seem to be telling us now that all the problems are fixed and this would never happen again. So please explain to us what would happen if the soccer situation, if the team were to find out that players were being abused, what would happen now? How can parents and athletes feel safe given what the changes that you've made today, as of today?
Well, the Safe Sport roster deals with a number of different factors there, so that the coaching and licensing program is much more robust.
So if a coach was accused of abuse and he left the system and maybe he went to another province, would there be a flag beside his name would
Yes.
another organization know that he had faced allegations somewhere else, even if those allegations hadn't even been proven in court, maybe?
The coach and club licensing program requires that all the coaches that are within that are certified, and they do criminal record checks, and they have to sign off on the code of conduct and ethics.
Do you think Bob Berardo would have signed off on a code of ethics?
I can't comment on what Bob Berardo might or might not have done.
I'm just wondering how effective it is if you have a predator in the system to say there's a code of ethics. I'm not sure that that's going to go anywhere. What victims want to hear is that if there's allegations against someone, he's not going to be allowed to go off and coach young people in another jurisdiction where maybe people in charge like you don't know where he's gone and haven't bothered and don't feel the moral authority to follow up and find out where he's gone and if he's abusing other young children. As you know, I'm sure they heard in court after he was convicted just last year. So are there any gaps in the system, sir? Are you telling us there's no gaps left in the system?
There's always going to be gaps within any system. If there hasn't been if there are mere allegations that are made, I don't know whether that's a public, there's a public record of that. I think that the Safe Sport roster makes it much more robust and much more difficult for any of these individuals to get involved and coach within our system, or whether it's coaching, refereeing, or being an administrator.
Let me ask you this. Do you think non-disclosure agreements intimidate survivors and prevent them from participating in any investigation? And do you think that those NDAs allow abuse to continue and spread to other victims?
I would say a non-disclosure agreement could have that impact.
And so what's your position on non-disclosure agreements then?
I've never requested anybody to enter into a non-disclosure agreement.
Okay, very good. So going back to the gaps in the system, I'd be interested to hear from your expertise, any recommendations you have for this system to improve it, to make sure that even if it is just allegations, that people are aware, that maybe people follow up, because we really don't want to see this happen ever again.
Yeah. Well, again, I get back to the Safe Sport roster, and I think we've got a lot of the pieces in place there that provide that level of protection. I think that there's just greater awareness around all the issues, and I think that because of that, because of the efforts of all of these individuals to bring these things to light, and because of the efforts of Canada Soccer and other sports bodies to look to protect those vulnerable individuals within our system, that those types of things will come to light. The measures, the initiatives that we've put in place will cover off most of that, but there's always going to be areas where there's somebody's going to slip through the cracks. But I think that if we're 99% there, then we've done an exceptional job in trying to address those issues.
Thank you, Lisa. I think your time is up. I don't think we're going to be able to have the second round of Conservatives and Liberals. So I'm going to go to Sébastien. Sébastien Lemire, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Reid, according to the McLaren report, members of Soccer Canada were aware of the acts by Mr. Berardo. Why were they not reflected in the minutes of the meetings?
In what period are you referring to?
Au moment où ça s'est passé.
At the time where it happened, it'd be hard to say exactly what time, but was this in the minutes?
The initial allegations came out in 2008, I believe. Um, And so I'm aware of what is that the executive board reviewed the allegations and they engaged an independent ombudsperson to review all the details and come back with a report. So I don't know why it would not have been reported in the minutes of the executive board at that time.
Pourquoi la licence d'entraîneur?
Why was the coaching license why was it not suspended immediately once there was an inquiry underway?
The coaching license is not, at that time, was not something that was administered by Soccer Canada or the provincial bodies. It's a separate entity that grants the licenses. So I'm not sure, whether that was something that they sought to do at the time, but it was not, the license is not granted by Canada Soccer.
À ce moment-là, pourquoi Soccer Canada?
Well, why didn't Soccer Canada follow its own policies with regard to harassment?
15 seconds.
Are you talking about in 2008, the policies that were in place at that time as it related to harassment?
Bien sûr, à tous les autres moments, je veux dire.
Well, at whatever moment when there were these reprehensible acts, I can understand that you do not imply your own policies.
The actions of the executive board at that time were to review the allegations and engage the ombudsperson to determine what the next actions would be. That was the outcome of that particular event.
Thank you very much. I will go to Peter Julian of the NDP. Peter, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm so astonished by the testimony we've been hearing with regard to Mr. Berarda. And to think that he was given access to Canada Soccer and its other associations, access to other victims, it's really appalling.
To also come to the issue of financial impropriety that has been raised. And the issue around the Canada Soccer business contract, if I understand it correctly, Mr. Reid, you are saying that there was no evaluation done of other contracts that other national soccer organizations have signed on sponsorship and broadcasting rights. There was no analysis done of what the potential revenue would be. That this was simply signed without a full knowledge of what the financial impacts were on the organization and ultimately on Canada's soccer teams. Is that true?
No, I think maybe I misspoke earlier or was misinterpreted, but we did a fulsome analysis of what the outcomes would be. The model is based on Soccer United marketing in the United States, where the MLS and the U.S. Soccer Federation collectively.
Okay. Thank you. So what was the projected revenues in terms of broadcasting? I'm not talking about what Canada Soccer got. I'm talking about what the overall projections were financially for the media rights, for all of the things that were being handed over to Canada Soccer. What were the projections in terms of revenue over a 5-year period?
I don't have those figures in hand right now.
You did have them. There was an evaluation done. You did have them.
There would have been some projections that were done at the time. Yes.
Who would have that information? Because we've been asking now for a number of weeks.
That information would be with Canada Soccer staff.
Okay. I want to take Christine Sinclair's testimony before this committee. She talked about the fact that information was not being provided to people. she stated on the record here that Canada's soccer's approach has reflected a culture of secrecy and obstruction around financial issues. Do you understand why there is so much criticism of Canada Soccer, not only from the Canada's national women's team, but from so many because of the lack of financial transparency?
I believe that we're completely transparent in terms of our financial results. We publish our audited financial statements annually. It's online and available to anybody who wants to review them. I don't think that there should be an issue about transparency. I think that
you're not giving us the figures for the evaluation. There is a lot of unanswered questions. That is very clear. Madam Chair, I'll keep going if you like.
No, Mr. I know you very well will, Mr. Julian, if I allow you to. But I think what we're going to do is I think that this witness we need to delve a little deeper into some of the questions that have been asked, and I don't know that the committee feels they've received answers. So I'm going to go to the Conservatives and the Liberals for 3 minutes instead of 5 each. So I will go with the Conservatives. I don't know who is going to be there. Is it Kevin?
It is, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Mr. Reid, your testimony is interesting today because when you were president of Soccer Canada in 2017, Berarda actually was the head coach of Canada Soccer Under-17 National Championship. He was the head coach of the Coastal Under-17 in October of 2018. So you tell me you knew maybe in 2008 you did nothing, and then 10 years later, here he surfaces at a national championship coaching under-17. You know, and yet your opening statement, soccer is the safest sport in our country, and here I've just found out that Berarda won a Canada Soccer Under-17 National Championship as head coach when you were the president of Soccer Canada. Could you comment on that? You surely must have known he was head coach of Under-17.
Again, that's a club or district in the province of British Columbia. I was aware that he had joined that club, but I wasn't aware that he was involved with the national championship. It's untenable that he was able to get in a position where he was coaching at that level or coaching at all at that time. And that is something that I apologize profusely for. If I could have done something, if I was able to do something, I would have at the time.
On Monday, we had Andrea Neil here, Kira McCormick. Both were very critical of Soccer Canada. In fact, McCormick said, a horrible Canadian soccer story, the story no one wants to listen to, but everyone needs to hear. And of course, with Neil, the off the field, she alleged she saw financial problems with Soccer Canada and the cover-up of sexual abuse. Did you tune in Monday when former soccer players like Andrea Neil, Kira McCormick made those comments?
Yes, I did.
Thoughts?
Again, I completely support their position. We have tried to reach out and create a dialogue with persons involved and try to engage them in meaningful conversation about what kind of resolution we can have to it, take input and feedback as it relates to what we're trying to accomplish with our safe sport initiatives. Yes, it would have been something that I would have loved to have had further conversations with them, opportunity to do so as we moved into 2020 and the COVID pandemic. But I want to just reassure them that it's
Please wrap up, Mr. Reid.
Very disturbing, and with the egregious incidents that occurred. So
Thank you. And I will now go to the Liberals. Anthony Housefather for 3 minutes, Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Reid, if you had knowledge that somebody was a sexual predator and he moved in next door to your daughter, would you tell her?
yes,
Yes. So here you had knowledge, you acknowledged you knew that Mr. Berarda had been accused of multiple claims of sexual abuse of players in 2008, and yet you had knowledge that he was coaching. You said before you didn't know he was coaching anywhere, but you just acknowledged that you knew that he was affiliated with Coastal U17, which actually means that what you said before isn't true, because you said before you had no knowledge he was coaching over that period, that you were president of BC Soccer and president of Canada Soccer. Now you've said you did know. Why did you not alert the players on Coastal U17 team of the allegations if you were aware that he was coaching?
first of all, I wasn't, my initial comment was about him coaching under 14. I wasn't aware that he was coaching within any system back at that time. More recently, when it came to light that he was coaching with Coastal FC, I don't have a reason, I don't have an excuse for not alerting whatever the appropriate body was.
You do acknowledge that had you taken action in 2008, which you had ample opportunity to take action to alert the network in British Columbia, at least, that don't hire Mr. Berarda as a coach, that many women would have not been assaulted over the next 10 years. You do acknowledge that, right? That it is your fault.
I don't know all of the allegations that were made subsequent to 2008.
You don't know all the allegations. Did you know that the allegations were of a sexual nature?
Prior to 2008?
No, in 2008, when he was terminated by Canada Soccer, did you know the allegations were of sexual nature?
Yes.
Did you take steps to find out more information if you didn't know enough about what the allegations were? No. And then you didn't alert anybody knowing this for 10 years. So how did you not accept responsibility for what happened to all those women over the next decade? How could you say it's not related? It's completely related. You had the knowledge. You were the one person in British Columbia that had the knowledge, and you did nothing. And you even said that you would alert your daughter. So, of course, your daughter is important to you, but why are the other girls that played for these teams?
Excuse me. The allegations that were made at the time for 2008 related to years prior to that. I'm not sure that there were allegations subsequent to that date. And I repeat, I don't have an excuse for not alerting anybody to the fact that he was, when it came to my knowledge, that he was coaching in 2017.
So you still don't recognize that you should have done something to alert the system in 2008. You still don't recognize that you knew he lived in British Columbia and you knew his job was in soccer. You knew that that would be where he would seek employment. You had knowledge of sexual misconduct allegations that led him to being fired by Canada Soccer and the Whitecaps, and you did nothing. That's horrible.
Thank you, Mr. Housefather. And I think we will now move on to the next hour and the next witnesses. I want to thank the committee, and I want to thank Mr. Reid for being a witness here. But I must say that as chair, I find this to be quite disturbing. The fact that people in charge of young people and looking at safety in a sport does not feel they have a moral obligation. It concerns me as chair, it concerns me as a physician, it concerns me as a mother. Anyway, we shall now suspend. Do we need to suspend, clerk, or do we just go straight? So we should suspend for a few minutes until we come to the final hour. Thank you very much. call this hour to order and welcome to meeting number 77 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I want to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Today's meeting is in a hybrid format. I just have some, again, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, is meeting to continue its study on safe sport in Canada. Before I go forward, there are little bits of housekeeping. At the bottom, for those of you on virtual, at the bottom of the screen is a globe icon. Please look at it, and it can give you the translation you may need, so you can check in whether you want English, French, or flow original. If everything that you say or do should go through the chair, answering of questions, speaking, do not speak unless I have acknowledged that you can. And that is basically it. So I think we should begin, and I want to ask one question of the clerk. We have now have only got 3/4 of an hour to do this. Is there any ability for us to go over that time, Mike, or do we just have to hard stop at 5:30?
No, we should be able to add a few minutes to the meeting for sure.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. Okay, so we're going to begin with Dr. Julie McFarlane, co-founder of Can't Buy My Silence, Professor Emeritus of Law, the University of Windsor. We then have the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, Jill Schiller-Beer, Leading Change, Call to Action, Coordinator, and Anthony Parker, Leading Change, Facilitator. Now, just a little bit again to know that each of you, as a group, Ms. Schiller-Beer and Ms. Parker, you will have 5 minutes for the group. So you can divide up your time the way you see fit. Dr. McFarlane, you have 5 minutes. And so we will begin now with Dr. McFarlane for 5 minutes, please. I will give you a 30-second shout out when you should wrap up.
Thank you very much. My name is Julie McFarlane, and I have been a law professor for 40 years, working in the UK, Ireland, Hong Kong, Australia, the US, and most of all, obviously, in Canada. I was honored with the Order of Canada for my work on access to justice in 2022. I'm also personally a survivor of sexual abuse and rape. In 2014, I sued the Anglican Church for sexual abuse by a church minister while I was a teenager. This was when I first encountered the default use of non-disclosure agreements to silence those who make settlements over sexual abuse. I told the Anglican Church immediately that I had no intention and would not consider signing an NDA. In fact, part of my settlement with them was a new code of practice for their insurers working with the victims of sexual violence and abuse, and it includes a provision that an NDA will only be used in, quote, exceptional circumstances. How naive I was then. Now I know this practice continues, and hence my commitment to legislative and not purely voluntary change that can be monitored. And I think that has other ramifications for the issues you're discussing here in the committee. In 2013, I became aware that one of my faculty colleagues at the University of Windsor was sexually harassing students. Having heard directly from the students he was targeting, I went to my president, who ordered his suspension and an investigation. And a year later, he was terminated for multiple instances of abuse and harassment in a 3-page termination letter. The students and I felt relieved. That is, until I began to receive calls from colleagues at overseas law schools where he had applied for a position. They were asking me, why did a 10-year professor leave the University of Windsor? I realized immediately the university had given him an NDA, a copy of which I now have, and it includes cleaning his personnel files for the previous 10 years and actually also a letter of recommendation, which he took with him. I'm sure this all sounds rather familiar, having just been listening to the testimony of Mr. Reid of Soccer Canada. It is absolutely plain that Bob Barado was given an NDA, as this is a default practice in the settlement of sexual abuse and harassment suits. And of course, that was why nothing was ever said about where he was going to work next. No red flag was placed by his name, and why Mr. Reid would have needed to get legal advice if he was going to speak about what he had done and to place a warning on him. We see this constantly, all the time. After 2 years of efforts to persuade the University of Windsor to change its policy on giving NDAs to people they acknowledged were known predators, I resigned in disgust in December 2020. I then joined forces with Zelda Perkins, who is the first woman to break her Harvey Weinstein NDA, and we have created Can't Buy My Silence, a global campaign to ban the use of NDAs which cover up misconduct. We have already made rapid strides, I'm happy to say, in Canada. We have a bill that has passed into law in Ontario, strengthening post-secondary institutions, that now bans universities like the University of Windsor from doing what they did in 2014, which feels very important to me personally. But further than that, having worked with lawmakers in Ireland to create a model bill to limit the use of NDAs to their original purpose, which, let's remember, was the protection of trade secrets. That legislation is going forward in Ireland now, and it has already been passed into law in Prince Edward Island as the Non-Disclosure Agreements Act 2022. And that legislation covers all workplaces, including universities, including voluntary positions, for example, coaching in a sports area. And that has now been tabled also in British Columbia, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, and very shortly now in Ontario. We have collected data at Can't Buy My Silence, which is both qualitative through personalized, anonymized stories of people who have been coerced into NDAs, who consistently don't understand what they're signing and consistently aren't given an alternative to protect their own confidentiality. The reality is that all these abuses, the ones that we've been hearing about this afternoon, and many others, are covered up in NDAs. And let's be clear, NDAs are not for the benefit of victims, although that is a prevalent myth. They are to protect the abuser and the organization. What is available for the victim is a one-sided confidentiality clause. Instead, they have to promise to protect the party who abused them, the person or the organization or both, in exchange for their own privacy. There is literally no good reason to have non-disclosure agreements, and in sports abuses, as in all other cases of abuse, misconduct, or discrimination. This is obviously what happened with Bob Barado of Soccer Canada, and it is consistently the story that we hear in the work that we now do on the campaign.
Please wrap up, Dr. McFarlane.
Please recognize that the Hockey Canada case has demonstrated this to Canadians, and NDAs are the reason we never knew about these cases before, and they are the reason that Canada Soccer has been able to hide the misconduct of a coach who has then gone on to create further victims. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we go to the Leading Change Call to Action group. 5 minutes, please, for whomever is going to speak. Obviously, it's Ms. Schillebeer, yes?
Thank you.
5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to be joining you today from Amiskwaciwâskahikan, also known as Edmonton, and I use she, her pronouns. My colleague Anthony Parker, who uses he, him pronouns, lives in Mohkinstsis, which is also known as Calgary. We recognize that we are all treaty people and have a responsibility to understand our history so we can honor the past, be aware of the present, and create a just and caring future. So my team at the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, or ACWS, works to bring shelter-informed gender-based violence prevention education to diverse individuals, schools, community groups, workplaces, and sports teams. My colleague played as a wide receiver with the Calgary Stampeders, and through our 10-year partnership with that team, has become a leading change facilitator as well. Through our work, we have both seen firsthand the transformational effect that our program can have. ACWS and our members have been working in gender-based violence prevention since our organization was formed 40 years ago this month. We began strategic work to engage men and boys in the early 2000s through various programs we now call Leading Change. Leading Change has its roots in sports culture and was developed in partnership with Dr. Jackson Katz, who leads a highly regarded gender-based violence prevention program in the United States. As you can see from the Inspired Communities model that was submitted for everyone's review, our approach is rooted in 6 key values, and I'd like to highlight 3 of those. We are informed by women's organizations and experience. This is crucial, as though anyone can experience gender-based violence, women and gender minorities experience violence at the highest rates. Our program is both informed by and accountable back to those lived experiences. Secondly, we take a strengths-based approach. And what this means is that we focus on the things that we can do as opposed to the things that we can't. It also means that while we know most violence is perpetrated by men, most men are not violent. In fact, most men have more capacity to affect change than they may realize, and they are a vital part of the solution, as you have been discovering in your study. Thirdly, we know that transformation requires long-term, large-scale, and coordinated efforts. And we're grateful for the work of this committee to look at the issues facing Hockey Canada, not as limited to a few circumstances, but as widespread and systemic that extends well beyond one group, one sport, or one place. Now, over the years, we've worked with numerous organizations, and in sports, this includes both Alberta professional football teams, various minor football teams, staff at Hockey Alberta, and most recently, the Alberta Junior Hockey League, or the AJHL. So during the 21-22 season, we started with one team, the Blackfalds Bulldogs, and over 4 sessions, we explored what gender-based violence is, what consent means. We discussed healthy masculinities and healthy relationships and talked about their leadership role in making change. And after a transformative season, the Bulldogs put us in touch with Ryan Bartoshik, the commissioner of the AJ, so we could take this work across the league. Commissioner Bartoshik has been incredibly supportive and had this to say about the work, may it please the committee, and I quote, "We believe that our players can use their position as role models and leaders in Alberta communities to contribute to positive change and promote anti-violence. The Alberta Council of Women's Shelters has provided our young athletes with education on abuse prevention, consent, and assistance in identifying how they can model this leadership in their everyday lives. We thank the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters for their commitment to this initiative and look forward to the partnership in the upcoming 23-24 season," end quote. So this past year, we worked with about 400 players in the league. We talked in depth about issues ranging from the unhealthy messaging that's circulating on some internet forums, to navigating news media on current events related to gender-based violence, to understanding the amount of safety work that most women do just to leave their house on a daily basis, to how to hear a no and respond respectfully to that. The players were all left with the same message, that it is not enough to not be part of the problem. They need to be part of the solution actively. And the feedback we got from this was very encouraging. Since completing the season, as I mentioned, Commissioner Bartoshik has invited us back for next year. We've been recognized by the Edmonton chapter of the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund for our work, and we've presented our work at a national conference, leading to conversations about how to expand the program. So may it please the committee, it's important when looking at solutions to these challenges to consider the resources required to run programs like ours. We firmly believe that supporting women's organizations to do this work both maintains accountability back to the people who have lived experience of violence, but it also ensures that the response evolves quickly, because violence itself evolves and manifests through changing technology and in responses to factors like COVID-19. We really need to be able to rise to meet this challenge that's ongoing in real time. This past year, we were fortunate to receive funding from the Canadian Women's Foundation and the Edmonton Kinsmen Club for different aspects of our work.
30 seconds.
That said, these are one-time grants which require significant work to source and secure. Our organization respectfully requests that in its recommendations, the committee consider 2 items. First, that women's organizations be supported to do this work and that any program that might be implemented have accountability back to women's organizations. And second, that stable and multi-year funding be considered as an essential part of any proposal the committee puts forth. Merci bien. Mr. Parker and I both welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schiller-Beer. And now we go to the question period time, and I'm going to have to juggle this time a little bit. I'm going to make a suggestion to the committee and let me know if there is any disagreement with it. I'm thinking we could, for the 6-minute round, we could make it a 5-minute round. Then we will have a second round where we can do 3 minutes for the two rounds for the Conservatives and the Liberals, and 2 minutes for the NDP and the Bloc. That'll give us the ability to go a little bit over time without going too much over time. All right.
Yes,
Is everybody
I'm sorry,
in agreement?
Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I would ask you to stick to the 6-minute rotation, please.
All right, and we may not be able to have a full second round, okay? Because we have to think about resources and getting out of the room. All right, we will stick to the 6-minute round. Is everybody in agreement with Peter on that? No, okay, fine, so 6 minutes. I begin the first round. The round is 6 minutes. The 6 minutes include the question and answer, so please, everyone, try to be succinct if we can get in everything in time. And so the first question would come from the Conservatives. I have no name from the Conservatives about who would speak.
I'm speaking.
Yes, Martin, go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the witnesses being here today. You were here previously, and most of your testimony was to do with different subject matter, but you did initiate at the end this conversation, which I very much appreciated. Thank you in the sense for what your work has been doing. We've heard many challenges, but this is something more positive in what can be done. So I know the commissioner, and if we do get time in this study, he's willing to appear here. Alberta Junior Hockey League is in playoffs at the moment, which includes the town I'm in, of course. But your messaging in the sense, as I talk to the commissioner who has participated, from my understanding, in sessions with you, his evaluation of what you were doing and what you're attempting to do with the players under their league, the 16-year-old to 21-year-old young men, he felt incredibly valuable. You've quoted him. I would look for more responses that you may have had from other sources, other people. What other feedback are you getting for what you are out to accomplish?
So we have had a great response. Leading change, we like to call it a promising practice that has over 10 years worth of evidence-based research behind it. So we've been doing this work for a very long time, and all of our evaluations are really quite positive. So I can tell you stories about players. We go and we meet them in their locker rooms. So we often speak to them about, how is this for you? How are you doing? Because they just want to chat afterwards. And one player in particular I can think of who is aging out of the league this year said, 5 years ago when I started, this conversation would never have happened in the AJHL. And now it just seems normal, and it's making us a better team. It's making us stronger players. We're able to talk about things that are more difficult than we were previously. And if it pleases Madam Chair, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Anthony, who went through the training as a Stampeder about 10 years ago, close to, and has had experience as a facilitator as well.
Certainly.
You go there.
Parker?
Just before you go there, I appreciated you identifying where you held these sessions. You held them in their locker rooms, in their environment. You came to them where they worked.
Absolutely.
Right. That's an important piece to this for those players, how that made a difference from what I've heard. Thanks. Mr. Parker.
Thank you. Yes, I could definitely relate to having taken part in this training and then, of course, proceeding to becoming a facilitator. I think that the point that you just brought up about bringing it to the players in their locker rooms has proven to be tremendously valuable. Coming from that environment, I understand what it's like to be in that, hyper masculinized environment where we're expected to adhere to some certain norm or whatever that may be. And so being in their environment in the locker room, that's their comfort zone. And so we're able to go in there and really just have positive, face-to-face conversations in an environment where, their guards are going to be a little bit more down and they're a little bit more receptive. I can also attest to the fact that I remember having that mentality of when I started this program, that this was not going to be something that could be done in the locker room, with my guys. It was like I could see myself having this conversation outside of the locker room. And I can come to say now that I was pleasantly surprised in the response that I got. I'd like to also mention, as far as further examples, the impact that this program can have. I remember having a conversation with the Calgary Canucks in their locker room just a couple months ago. Wonderful conversation, great group of guys, and they were very receptive, and they were, thankful to us for coming to have that conversation, being willing to, coming from somebody who had been in their position. They found tremendous value in that. And I was wonderfully impressed when the next day at my kids' school, I happened to see, 4 of the Calgary Canucks there taking part in, a reading program with K-6 kids. And just goes to show when you're having that positive impact on those players, how that multiplicity can affect everything, right? They're going to have now the opportunity to have positive impact on all of the people in their communities. So I just like to share that with the committee, just what a wonderful impact that has had. And I've been able to witness that firsthand.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Martin?
Right. Back to in the sense this is not an easy and cheap process. It takes resources and it takes authentic voices. The request, in a sense, for multi-year is critical. This 1 year off, I think, is short-sighted. How has this response been in the sense of this request being out there for who needs to be authentic voices as participants to do this, because this is not an easy thing to do, and the multi-year funding for it? What has been your response to this message?
We've not yet been able to secure multi-year funding. So we're currently in that position of trying to source funding.
Excuse me, please. Someone has their mic on in the room. Can you please turn it off? Thank you. Now, Ms. Schillebeer, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, as I mentioned, we haven't as of yet been successful in securing multi-year funding to support the program. I would advise, though it is expensive to us as a charity organization, from a government budget perspective, it is relatively inexpensive. I don't know that there's a women's organization out there that hasn't yet figured out how to turn a dime into a dollar. In terms of the authentic voices bringing this work forward, it's really important that this be informed by the lived experiences of people who have experienced violence. And being an organization that is a member-based organization representing women's shelters in the province, we have been able to bring that forward and represent those voices. So when I mentioned that we had been presenting at a national conference on this work recently, it was a women's shelters conference, and we do have interest from a number of other organizations across the country to be able to take this prevention work forward. However, again, funding becomes that challenging issue of trying to make sure that we are able to travel to meet all those teams. In Alberta, we went from Fort McMurray to Brooks and east to west, Grand Prairie to Lloydminster. So we were in all corners of Alberta, and that does take time, staff resources, and there are travel costs involved.
For doing it for 1 year, I'm out of time, Madam Chair?
No, you have 30 seconds.
Right. Could you give it an estimate of the amount of resources and time that it took to run this program for 1 year in one province with one group of people?
I would estimate in terms of time, that was a huge commitment because we were doing everything during the season. So we were very focused on this and primarily this for about 4 months. And that was a team of 2 of us, 2.5 staff of ACWS, as well as some of our community facilitators, such as Mr. Parker. In terms of costs, we have actually costed out looking at the next year of implementing our year 2 curriculum, and we're looking at about between $40,000 and $50,000.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. So that's it, and we're going to move on to the next question, and that would be from the Liberals, Chris Biddle for the Liberals. Chris, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I guess I'll direct my questions at Dr. McFarlane. I agree with you. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be discussing many of these issues if the NDAs stood. But I guess I come at it as a former practitioner in civil litigation, where the use of NDAs, use of confidentiality clauses in settlement agreements were pretty standard, whether even if it was a small claims court dispute on something relatively minor, or with a firm precedent, always put that, always had a confidentiality clause in there. Is what you're proposing eliminating NDAs with respect to violence, harassment, or should it be across the board with respect to settlements?
Yeah, that's a great question. The legislation that we are advocating for is limited to non-disclosure agreements that cover up misconduct, sexual misconduct, harassment, bullying, and discrimination. And can I just add that there are an astonishing number of cases of proven discrimination, and I'm talking now pregnancy discrimination, discrimination against people with disabilities where they're not being accommodated and being forced out, and also many, many, many cases of discrimination on the basis of race and anti-Indigenous racism. So we are seeing an enormous proliferation of the use of non-disclosure agreements in these cases. And much as you indicated, they have become the default. We have data now that shows that a significant number of people, for example, in the United States, There are 3 studies that now show that 1 in 3 people is subject to a non-disclosure agreement. And there is data that we have put together from the quantitative survey we've been running that show that a third of the people who answered that survey have also been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And let me just pause a moment and suggest that there is an important distinction here between a confidentiality agreement that simply says the amount of the settlement will not be divulged. That is, I know, standard practice, and in fact, there's an exception in the legislation for just that. There may also be perhaps the need for confidentiality that the parties both agree to in terms of not speaking to the media or making this public. But what non-disclosure agreements are doing now is they are preventing people from speaking up for their entire lives, because these are indefinite agreements. They are until the end of one's life. In fact, I've heard arguments that they endure even after the death of the predator. But these are agreements for the lifetime of the victims who sign them, that they cannot speak to anybody. And we're talking about family, friends, therapists, counselors, elders, people who might support them. This is why it was apparently impossible for Soccer Canada to put a red flag on Mr. Barada, because he would have negotiated a non-disclosure agreement that would have kept everything that he did secret. And everybody would be too afraid to break that and to make it known that he is somebody who should be treated as a possibly dangerous person to be coaching young people. So we are, yes, confining this to those cases: misconduct, sexual violence and abuse, harassment and discrimination. But I would also say that the committee should be aware that these NDAs are also being used in consumer disputes. The reason that we didn't know about tainted baby formula for almost 20 years after the first settlement was made, and that formula kept on being sold and poisoning babies, was because of an NDA. We see them as well in professional services disagreements, where there is apparently, an oath taken to never speak of this again. And we see them in complaints in care homes, where people who speak up about concerns about the care being given to their relatives, or even professionals in the care homes, are being immediately NDA'd. So I think that is extremely dangerous, and I don't understand why there is any reason to perpetuate something that has, to a great extent, caused the re-victimization of folks in sports and beyond.
Thank you so much. I agree with you. You mentioned, legislation in Ireland with respect to the whole country. I was wondering if you could speak to the jurisdictional issues in Canada, and who would have to pass such legislation at what level of government?
Well, as obviously you would know, as a lawyer, the employment law in Canada is almost entirely provincial. And so we have been moving province by province because it needs to be done on a provincial level. However, I would add, and I have permission to inform you today, that there is a whole group of people who, of course, are employed by the federal government. And there are also many organizations and agencies that are funded by the federal government, including Hockey Canada, of course. And there will be a bill tabled shortly in the federal government to protect those workers in the federal government from being NDA'd. And again, we have many, many examples of individuals working for this government who have raised complaints about discrimination, complaints about sexual harassment, and they have been NDA'd and terminated. And I think it's very important to protect that group as well. But the vast majority of our work, because that is the jurisdiction of employment law, is province by province.
30 seconds. Chris?
Thank you so much, Dr. McFarlane. I just take the last few seconds to thank you for your work. It's very important work, and I kind of laughed to myself when you said you do know that, and of course I do, because I'm a University of Windsor grad, so I had excellent professors at the time. So I want to thank you for all your work that you're doing and the important work that you're moving forward with. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I now move to the Bloc Québécois, Sébastien Lemire. Sébastien, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. McFarlane, thank you very much for your work. which we congratulate you on. Thank you for this cause that is very important to our work today with regard to for example, the protection of the image of Hockey Canada. And when we started this study, you referred to abusive use of NDAs. So I think that your presentation was very pertinent. And do you agree that there should be a public inquiry, independent public inquiry, to shed light on the situation of the abusive use of these NDAs in all sports, not just Hockey Canada and soccer, but all sports? And if you've been following what we have been discussing in this committee and elsewhere.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, there is a methodological problem here, as I would say, as a researcher, which is that we're talking about secret settlements. So how you collect data on secret settlements, of course, is very problematic. We've done it by allowing people to be anonymous in both telling their full stories and also completing our survey. And there has been quite a lot of material uncovered by various Freedom of Information requests over the last couple of years by journalists. But I think it will be imperative in an inquiry that includes looking at the use and the prevalence, which I think will shock even the members of the committee, of NDAs in sports organizations and beyond. It will be important, for example, to say that NDAs that were signed that would ordinarily prevent people even saying they signed an NDA, because of course you will realize that even saying you signed an NDA is a breach of an NDA. It will be very important to release people for that purpose, because otherwise there will be inevitably fear about people coming forward. The committee may know that in Manitoba, we have already had the bill there moved to committee. It's actually just starting all over again now, and it's about to go to committee again because there was not sufficient time for it to complete last session. In that committee, we made it clear to people who are in touch with us constantly about the use of NDAs and their silencing via an NDA, that they could speak without fear of consequences because they have parliamentary privilege to do so. And that session was absolutely amazing. And it is available for people to watch on our YouTube channel. And I think that the inquiry needs to make clear that people can come forward and speak to them about being bound by an NDA with no consequences to them, because people literally live in fear. They live in fear of having the money that they may have been given to compensate for the harm taken away. And they also live in fear that their name will then be made public. They don't want their names made public. They want to maintain their own privacy and to control that as they would wish to do, which is exactly, for example, what the federal government's now doing in relation to criminal publication bans. Give the victims the right to control how public they want to be. So I hope that the inquiry will look at the use of NDAs, but it will have to be with some kind of amnesty or release for people who've signed them.
Madame McFarland, vous avez visiblement...
You've already answered a number of my questions, and I'd like to add, if I think about Ms. De Silva's testimony this week, and others did as well, talking about the prosecution there could be and how few resources there are for assisting athletes that might find themselves in this kind of situation. And how can we help people that dare to speak up, and would an inquiry help?
I think an inquiry will help. But I also, I'm sorry to be repetitive, have to return to the fact that what will really help is taking away the current right to force an NDA on somebody in order for them to secure their own privacy. One of the questions that's asked in our survey is for people who decided not to file a formal complaint of discrimination or harassment or sexual harassment, why did they not do that? And over 30% now, the survey is increasing all the time. It's currently at about 1,200 people, which is a pretty respectable number. 1/3 of the people who said they didn't complain said they didn't complain because they anticipated they would have to sign an NDA. and they didn't want to sign an NDA because increasingly Canadians understand just what that means. It means that you are silenced for the rest of your life. And obviously, these folks aren't being followed around with video cameras, Sebastian, but people become very, very fearful. There are all kinds of mental health consequences that flow from this as well, that we also have a lot of data on. So I think that it will be critical to simply take away the possibility of an NDA in the future, which is what our legislation is doing, and to restrict that to the use of intellectual property and trade secrets, which was what this was originally designed to do in the 1980s.
30 seconds.
When NDAs were first developed, they were developed in Silicon Valley in the tech boom. And I think most people here will realize that there were good reasons to try to get beyond the existing restraint of trade common law and enable them to keep their commercial innovation information secret forever. That's what NDAs were for. And now we say that any kind of misconduct is a trade secret. That stretches the point.
Thank you, Dr. McFarlane. I think your time is up, Sebastien. Thank you. And now I go to the New Democrats, Peter Julian. Peter, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who have greatly contributed to our consideration of this issue. The federal government has just reestablished funding for Hockey Canada, even if Hockey Canada hasn't changed its attitude with the use of NDAs. And I think this restoration of funding is a bit premature. And is this a healthy move on the part of the government to say, well, you haven't to change your attitude towards NDAs, but you're going to get your public funding back?
Receiving funding from the federal government after a suspension, even though they have not backed off from signing non-disclosure agreements. And this is something that has come up repeatedly in the Hockey Canada hearings we have had. So my question is very simple. Is it appropriate for the federal government to be financing Hockey Canada when they have not made any sort of commitment to stop the pressure of signing non-disclosure agreements for victims of sexual abuse or sexual violence?
May I answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
That's addressed to you.
Thank you, Dr.
directing
McFarlane. You're directing it to Dr. McFarlane. Go ahead, Dr. McFarlane.
Thank you very much. I was absolutely shocked when I heard, I was away actually in the United Kingdom when the news came through a few weeks ago that Hockey Canada was going to get funding back, but without having said anything about NDAs. There was, in fact, a kind of throwaway comment that was made by the Hockey Canada CEO to the committee last summer when the hearings began, that if anybody wanted to be released from their NDA, no problem, just get in touch. I cannot tell you what a disingenuous statement that is, because how are people supposed to get in touch? They're supposed to Google Hockey Canada. Who do they ask? How do they do this? And of course, these are all people who are very fearful of the consequences of breaking their NDA. So I think that the very first thing that Hockey Canada should have done, and they should have done this last summer, was to say, we shall formally release people from existing non-disclosure agreements so that they can contribute to the work of the study and the work of the committee. And they should have done that, and they still can do it, by writing directly to each of the people. They know who the people are. They can write to them directly and say, here, we forthwith will take away, we will tear up your non-disclosure agreement. The second thing they should do, otherwise nothing, frankly, is going to change. It will all just be pushed back under the carpet again, is to undertake that they will not use them again in the future. They can make agreements for confidentiality on the amount of money they paid. There might be special circumstances that they want to agree to in terms of the public use of some of that information, but gagging victims without them being able to speak to anybody and also, of course, being unable to then warn others about the people whom they have experienced. This has become so incredibly effective to enable these perpetrators to reoffend. And we see that over and over again. There is much research now, and I'm sure my colleague witnesses are very aware of this. There is much research that shows that the acts of violence and sexual violence and harassment are carried out by a very small number of people over and over and over again. This is very rarely a one-off occurrence. So we already know that people who have done this once are very likely to do it again, yet we're going to cover that up so they can do it again. So I believe Hockey Canada should both release people immediately by writing to them, not saying, hey, get in touch, we'll think about it. Write to them and release them. And secondly, they should undertake they should have been asked before funding was restored to undertake to never again use a non-disclosure agreement. But I did say as well at the beginning that I am also, I think that voluntary pledges are a very important part of culture change in relation to NDAs. But I think the reality is secret settlements have to be outlawed because we cannot monitor what is going on behind those closed doors.
Thank you, Dr. McFarlane. And I should
1 minute,
just
Peter.
say that Hockey Canada actually did pledge to release the victims from the non-disclosure agreements, and they have not followed up. In fact, they have doubled down, suggesting that victims somehow all want to sign these gag orders, which, of course, as you have disclosed, is disingenuous at best. We saw, you may have heard the testimony from Canada Soccer and the appalling, horrific case of Bob Berarda, where simply Canada Soccer neglected its obligations to the victims and allowed this sexual offender access to more victims. I am wondering, internationally, you've cited some countries that have non-disclosure legislation. In those countries, do the national sports organizations abide by those laws as well? Are you aware of a textbook case of a country that has obliged its national sports organizations to stop the practice of gagging the victims of sexual abuse and sexual violence through non-disclosure agreements?
Well, there are, just looking at the United States as an example, there are now 17 states that have passed legislation to restrict the use of non-disclosure agreements in cases of sexual violence, misconduct, discrimination, and so forth. We have all this information on our website. You can look at our tracker.
Thank you, Dr. McFarlane. I am sorry, Peter, but we are now 40 seconds over your 6-minute mark. Now, we can go an extra 15 minutes, and I would like to get the committee's sense on this. Can you stay another 16 minutes? Because we do have we're at 5:30 when this meeting is officially supposed to end. We could go another 15 minutes. It would mean that we would do a round of 3 and 3 and 1.5, 1.5, and 3 and 3. You know what I'm talking about. Do I have an agreement for that?
Chair, actually, I think there was an agreement amongst the committee members because some people have flights to get to on Thursday night. We agreed that we would end at 5:30, and although I found the witnesses fascinating and would love to have links to all of the bills that have been put forward provincially and the draft federally, I think we have to cut it here.
All right, Ms. Gladue. Now, anyone disagreeing with Ms. Gladue? I can see the floor. I don't see any hands being raised. So it's obvious that everyone is in agreement. So I think I want to thank the witnesses. It's as Marilyn said, it's fascinating. The issue of non-disclosure is a fascinating one. And I think that it's, the balance, as we've always heard, if you don't do a non-disclosure, people won't want to come up and victims won't want to come up and speak about their problems because they would be afraid. So there is this two sides of the story, but what you are saying makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to thank you all three of you for coming and presenting. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for some very interesting testimony. And I now declare the meeting adjourned.
Un gros merci à l'équipe d'interprétation.
Thank you very much to the interpretation team.
Thank you.